Howdy, howdy, howdy. My name is Kaizo, and today we're going to go deep on. Charles Bukowski said, "Genius might be the ability to say a profound thing in a simple way." What are some real-life examples of this? James Baldwin said that it is extremely expensive to be poor. 3 hours and no one's posted the Sam Vimes boots thing? Must be a record, surely. The reason that the rich who were so rich, Vimes reasoned, was because they managed to spend less money. Take Boots, for example. He earned $38 a month plus allowances. A really good pair of leather boots cost $50, but an affordable pair of boots, which were sort of okay for a season or two and then leaked like hell when the cardboard gave out, cost about $10. Those were the kind of boots Vimes always bought and wore until the soles were so thin that he could tell where he was in Ankh-Morpork on a foggy night by the feel of the cobbles. But the thing was that good boots lasted for years and years. A man who could afford $50 had a pair of boots that'd still be keeping his feet dry in 10 years' time, while a poor man could only afford cheap boots that would have spent $100 on boots in the same time and would still have wet feet. This was Captain Samuel Vimes's boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. Anyone who has ever struggled with poverty knows how extremely expensive it is to be poor. James Baldwin, Nobody Knows My Name. He also wrote in Giovanni's Room that the way to be really despicable is to be contemptuous of other people's pain. I think about that a lot. Comparison is the thief of joy. Theodore Roosevelt. That one hit me in the gut, man. It really sums it up, right? It's the simplest way to express a flaw in the human condition and warn against it. Also read this as a huge warning against social media. Compare and despair. Uncredited. I'm not entirely sure if it fits as an example, but I've always found do not fear failure, but be terrified of regret a really meaningful quote worthy to think about. There's a similar idiom I love. It's not really a failure as long as you learn something from it. In our house, we like to say, sometimes we win, sometimes we learn. The chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. Also, habits are cobwebs at first, cables at last. The bonds of degradation are too light to be felt until they are too strong to be broken. Charlie Munger from Poor Charlie's Almanac while talking about addiction. When you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. God, Futurama. Sysadmin. My employer exchanged an external admin service that was barely visible or needed against another which now is processing all suddenly appearing requests in a timely fashion. The way they solve the problems is highly visible to the guys in charge of hiring them. They're so happy with the new company. This is why you need a good CIO. Their job is to sell the IT requirements and services to the top and tell them why what they want to do is probably a dumb idea. Because we in IT exist to provide the services that you just expect to work, but also to make sure there is a functioning recovery plan for when it doesn't. Yeah, your whole system went down, but because IT was doing its job, we only lost half a day's data. Everything is working fine. Why do we pay you so much? Everything is broken. Why do we pay you so much? A Spanish proverb says, a boss's love lasts as long as water in a basket. A proper answer to those meetings is, "I'm your ghost hunter. Have you seen any ghosts lately? You're welcome." Now, seriously, I'd propose a simple exodus from my current job. You want to test if my paycheck is justified? Okay. I'll go and work for another company or freelance for a bit for a while. Just keep my position empty and see how it goes. If you suddenly discover that I was actually doing stuff, you have my number, and if you call me back, I might return for a price. All that, but in friendly enterprise win-win language. No hard feelings, just business. I sell know-how by the hour. You are free to opt out and see how it goes, pal. Even with all of the layoffs in IT, if you are half competent, you've got a lot of leverage. You just need the skill to instill that idea on the people who write your paycheck. And it's not always possible, so be informed at all times about career options, positions, networking, and the like. A worker is a mercenary. Don't fall for the company loyalty bullshit. Audio engineer/editor. Jordan Schlansky also said something similar regarding his various duties as the associate producer at Conoco. If he prepares his body in various ways at the start of each day, people won't know he did anything at all. Wired has some videos where professionals explain a topic in 5 levels of difficulty to 5 different people: a child, a teen, a college student, a grad student, and an expert. I effing love those videos. I'm following along, understanding everything until somewhere around college student. Then by the time I'm at expert, I'm having my mind blown. Just look up Wired Expert 5 Levels on YouTube and you'll get a ton of results, like a theoretical physicist explaining the concept of time. I needed that for my old coworker. He thought he was this magical thinker, but it was mostly stupid conspiracy theories like the earth is flat and time doesn't really exist. Time obviously exists. You can measure it, experience it, feel it. All the things that prove it exists. Time exists because entropy exists. The fact that things break down eventually is proof that we are moving forward in time. Our measurements of time are totally arbitrary and only exist because of the specific way the earth rotates. I love the one music theory video where the levels are like child, teen, a college student, and a professional, Herbie Hancock. I appreciate Jacob, but his music lacks personal heart, honestly. More of a look what I can do. I wish him the best. I think you are right. For Jacob, most of his music isn't about communication like most artists. For him, it's about play and experimentation. Instead of being consistent to communicate a message, he thinks, what if I did it this way? I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. Andy Bernard. Don't waste your time always searching for those wasted years. Face up, make your stand, and realize you're living in your golden years. Perhaps my favorite Maiden piece. Here, take my upvote for the Iron Maiden reference. The older I get, the more I've begun to realize that it's sort of always the good old days. 6 or 8 years ago, I was missing my early mid-20s. Now in my mid-30s, I'm missing my late 20s, early 30s. This made me realize I can start appreciating the times I'm in now instead of missing them in another 10 years. I mean, I was enjoying my life then too, but I wasn't taking stock of the fact that I was enjoying it, if that makes sense. But now I try to realize that these are the good old days that I'm going to miss down the road. TheOnion.com. Area man always nostalgic for 4 years ago. When you are hungry, eat. When you are tired, sleep. This is the way of Zen. I saw some wilderness experts say that this is why little kids survive being lost more in the unexpected. They drink when they are thirsty, they bury themselves in leaves when cold, and sleep when they are tired. Many adults, on the other hand, just keep walking until they die. My former father-in-law was in the Air Force, and while half asleep, I heard him telling his wife an old adage from boot camp. Never run when you can walk, never walk when you can stand still, never stand when you can sit, never sit when you can lay down, never miss a chance to sleep. Apparently, the idea is to assess the task at hand and conserve energy by doing the minimum, so you can use more energy when it's required. I moved down south for school and was having a hard time with the heat. The AC in my apartment wasn't working, and I had grown up in a cold climate. I was not acclimated to living in the heat whatsoever. I saw an old man in the park wearing a full suit and asked him how he could handle the heat in the suit. He told me, "Do it like the lizards do. Do everything real slow. Walk slow. Breathe slow. Think slow. Don't make a fuss. Don't be in no hurry." Then he left. Honestly, his advice did help. This makes me think about a saying for backpacking. Something like, don't save your best meal for the last day. Eat your nicest sounding meal every day. That way you'll always be eating your best option. I butchered it, but y'all get the idea. Speaking of which, I heard that hunter-gatherers had more leisure time than we do. Studies have shown that they only needed to work 15 to 20 hours a week. Who needs the latest iPhone anyway? I was a helicopter pilot for a decade. Some of the best pilots I ever met were absolute dog instructors. They could do things with an aircraft that left everyone impressed, but couldn't explain it to save their lives. Or the only tool they were capable of using was the old school military be a hard butt until they get it or quit approach. The best instructors I knew had 4 or 5 ways of teaching the same thing, even if they didn't personally use any of those techniques, and the ability to read a student and adjust on the fly. And that's the real mark of intelligence to me. The ability to teach complicated things to people who don't have a clue and tailor your approach. When I was first learning to do turning approaches, pretty complicated from a control input and energy management perspective, I had an instructor that broke it down into bite-sized critiques after each pattern. He clearly saw the half-dozen things I was doing wrong simultaneously, but only picked one area to focus on and correct each time. He took one of the more difficult maneuvers we teach and made it simple, and I was comfortable doing it by the end of the day. That's infinitely more impressive than simply being able to do it. TLDR. Being able to teach complicated things is more impressive than understanding them, and a better sign of intelligence. My friend and I were teaching new kids how to play string bass at a summer camp. One kid asked how to hold the bow. We just picked it up and showed them, but that wasn't enough. We had to take a few minutes to figure out how we would explain something that was second nature. Every once in a while, I think about how to describe things. I pretty firmly believe that you can use language to describe any object, and in my head, try to figure out how to describe, say, a chair to someone who isn't looking at it. It's actually something you have to think about. What something looks like is something we understand abstractly, so trying to apply language to it is weird. It's the same thing with actions like you described. Ooh. Reminds me of The Human Figure by Vanderpoel, which is a book assigned to me when study art. You could probably imagine how delighted I was when I realized that this book describes human figure using words. We're talking several paragraphs talking about all the planes and angles of a nose and how it relates to the rest of the face, using language. Language is the tool to create, in the medium of the mind. When I worked event security, my boss told me I had to train my team to think like me. My gates cleared people faster and caught more stuff people tried to sneak in. One of my more infamous catches was people trying to sneak beers crammed in Pringles cans. They'd even gone through the whole trouble to reseal the tube. To me, the giveaway was when she opened her bag for inspection, but the tube fell too fast. How was I supposed to teach that? The can looked heavy when it fell over. Intuition's a tricky one. Similar to when we had to frisk folks, we had a line for the ladies and lines for the guys. There were always more guys than gals working security, so ladies' lines tended to get backed up. If a woman wanted to consent to a guy doing us frisk, we would allow it. My line always was pretty mixed. Most of the other guys, not so much. No matter how many times I taught other guys my spiel, it didn't seem to matter. People aren't going to willingly let folks touch them if they don't feel comfortable. It's not even as if my process was that complicated. Explain every step I was going to do. Did this for everyone, man or woman. Then say what you were doing before each step as you were going through it. I tried to teach my GF snowboarding. The thing with snowboarding is, a lot of it is doing things by feeling. You can do exercises that will teach you how to do things by feel, but you'll have to figure it out by yourself while doing the exercises. Unfortunately, my GF is someone who wants things explained in minute detail, so while I could give her the exercises, she wanted to know exactly what I do with my toes, heels, etc. The problem is, I don't know either. I just had to think down intuitively. It was pretty frustrating for the both of us. Things you do by feel and have to know instinctively are some of the best things in life. I trained archers to teach archery. First thing was to let them shoot wrong-handed. It's an eye-opener. It teaches you the difference between knowing what to do and feeling it. I was always an above-average reader when I was a kid, but now that I'm a sped teacher, I've realized that I have no clue how to teach reading. I got asked to sub in for the reading specialist once and I was completely lost. I was like, I don't know, you just read it. When I taught elementary school, I learned this quick as well. I was in all the gifted ELA programs, but failed hard at math. I ended up being a much better math teacher than an ELA teacher because I knew the common pitfalls and mistakes. People with true talent often cannot explain their talent because it comes so naturally to them. They seldom have to rethink or consider their mistakes because their talent makes it almost instinctive. They think differently, and it expresses itself in truly astonishing ways, but it is usually not a traditional line of thinking that makes sense to others. Good instructors tend to be those who had to struggle and try different techniques in order to improve, and also those with good communication skills. In my opinion, to say one is more impressive or displays more intelligence is to oversimplify what intelligence is, and to diminish the different but incredible ways that our brains can express their brilliance. That's sometimes true. The best instructor I've ever worked with was a natural talent who could fly anything he touched and turn around and explain it on any level. Just a really unique combination of insight, communication, and raw talent. I think when we talk about people at the absolute peak of their game, LeBron, Brady, etc., there's a certain level of talent they can't explain or teach. But I don't believe the ability and instructional skills are totally separate areas. You can't teach someone to do something you aren't skilled at. And some people have more insight into how and why they're able to do things that doesn't come from repetition and struggling. They just get it on a more conscious level. Yeah, this is the opposite view of the same situation as those that can't do teach. Being an expert at something and being able to teach it are two completely different skills. In law school, my study group did particularly well because we adopted an approach of teaching each other concepts and theories. When one person didn't fully grasp a concept, someone else would step up and walk the whole group through it, and addressing others' questions/confusion would inevitably aid their own understanding of the concept too. I have something similar when I'm training new hires at work. I have a lot of the common computer commands down to a few hotkeys, but most of the time new hires don't know how to use key combos or function keys, so they're resistant to learning these shortcuts. The unwillingness to learn hotkeys because they're not good with computers is on them. My trouble in explaining why I do the things the way I do, that's on me. I know some hints and secrets that even other managers don't know, but explaining to others how I found shortcuts and why they work is a challenge. That's the exact same problem a lot of teachers, especially science teachers, have. It was always easy for them. That's why they decided to study that particular subject, so they often don't understand why people struggle with certain concepts. The more you can relate to someone's struggle to understand something, the easier it becomes to teach them. Adding to this, I feel like most universities have a severe issue with this. They have professors who are there to do research, but have to teach a low-level class. For most of them, this all came easy, but also they are so far past the basics that they really don't remember what it was like to be learning it. And then you add on that most don't really want to be teaching, and their priorities are their research, and it's just too many points of failure. Somehow, society's developed a system where professors with no interest in teaching are made to instruct students with little to no interest in the subject being taught. Oversimplified, of course. That's the real mark of intelligence to me. The ability to teach complicated things to people who don't have a clue and tailor your approach. Don't judge a fish by its tree climbing ability. Some people are great teachers, some people aren't, but while it's important to be intelligent to be a great teacher, they're not the same thing. Or rather, intelligence isn't just one thing, and someone can be really intelligent in one area, but a complete dumb butt in another. Wayne Gretzky was a very mediocre NHL head coach. Okay, everybody, be good at knowing where everyone is on the ice. Once you got that down, we can move on to the bit where you see 30 seconds into the future. It is better to stay silent and have people wonder if you're a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. In the humanities, you can either die a genius or live long enough to see all your ideas become completely discredited. Freud comes to mind. Brilliant for his time, but after his death, most, if not all, of his ideas were heavily discredited. I admire comedians for their ability to condense what are sometimes complex concepts into short observations. Example, free speech. It's a great idea until you realize it applies to everybody. A long-running debate summed up in one sentence. Since I sensed the OP was probably soliciting more serious examples, I like Albert Einstein's comment, ego equals 1 divided by knowledge. He was describing the Dunning-Kruger before either of them had entered kindergarten. Perfect is the enemy of good. I don't want to get too navel-gazing about it, but it explains why so many people are jaded, cynical, and disappointed. Good enough is what I struggle with. I've heard this quote and I try to think of it any time I find myself procrastinating. I try to stop obsessing over doing things perfectly and just instead get them done, then fix whatever's broken later. Sin, young man, is when you treat people like things, including yourself. That's what sin is. Terry Pratchett. Carpe Jungulum. Jugulum. It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not weakness. That is life. Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Browsing through a bookstore, I flipped open a self-help book. One chapter was titled, "If you don't like your milk, change your cow." Very profound, very simple. I didn't need to read that book. I picked another one. Why waste time, say a lot word, when few word do trick? Kevin Malone. Reminds me of my favorite Steve Martin line. Some people have a way with words, and others not have way. The delivery nails it. Never ask a barber if you need a haircut. This advice can be applied to almost anything you hear from someone else, whether it's a lawyer, investor, doctor, gardener, salesperson. You should always be careful of the incentives of the person you are dealing with. Someone should have told this to my dad before he asked my brother's orthodontist if I needed braces. It'd be like that sometimes. They don't think it be like it is, but it do. You want it be one way, but it's the other. Way she goes. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from a rigged demo. Andy Finkel. You should live your lives together, but you shouldn't together live one life. Yeah, that one's deep. What? How'd you go bankrupt? Two ways. Gradually, then suddenly. Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Oscar Wilde. I was watching an episode of Young Sheldon where he's trying to be exactly like Einstein. He calls a rabbi because he wants to convert to Judaism. The rabbi says to him, "At the end of your life, God won't ask, 'Why weren't you Einstein?' But he might ask, 'Why weren't you Sheldon?'" Reader, I was not expecting a Big Bang Theory spinoff to get that profound. Somehow rabbis on TV are always cool, but then I don't meet many in real life. Spoiler, IRL, they sometimes are, sometimes not. Username checks out, LOL. Eating potato cakes. Almost certainly not Wild. What QI didn't mention here is that "be yourself" is a very modern phrase and just didn't fit Wild's voice at all. But what if you're a horrible person? I actually really love Arlen Hamilton's variation on "be yourself, everyone else is already taken." Be yourself so the people looking for you can find you. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Mike Tyson. Hurt people hurt people. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. When you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. There's nothing sadder than a young pessimist, except an old optimist. And on that one, you guys have a great night. My name is Kai, and this has been Story Kai.